Nope. I don't know.
That I'm going to need some convincing.
Okay, good. This is what I was hoping. I really was hoping that you would not believe what I.
But you're saying whether or not I can literally change the properties of physics
Yes.
with my
Try to put a crack a little bit in that worldview, and I will maybe completely fail this. I love that.
Where the mind goes.
Awesome. All right, you ready? Should I dive in?
Mm-hmm.
So I've got a story for you. Did you grow up watching like Harry Potter movies or reading the books? Like, were you that kind of person or not?
So I grew up, I actually loved the Harry Potter series when I was
So like
in
the books
the
themselves.
books. And I read them when I was in maybe second grade. I started reading. I was
Same
really
actually.
young.
That's exactly when I started. Actually, my teacher read it to me first. But yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So two side stories. I'll tell you about the evolution of me reading it, and then the first time I ever heard about Harry Potter was actually when I was in Christian school back in, I guess this would have been second grade now, or maybe this was third grade. So I'd already maybe started reading Harry Potter, but they started preaching it as the devil's book.
Yep, I remember.
Right.
That.
And it was the first time in my young life that I ever realized, I don't think the church is right about this one. And I even told my parents about this, and they're like, yeah, no, this is
I love
stupid.
that this was like your break,
Right.
You know, your first break. With
Yeah,
the
it's me as a fucking
church.
chubby second grader. Like, is it though? I ended up bringing it up to my parents. Like, hey, well, let's get you out of this school. And shortly after we moved away from that Southern Baptist, South Carolina town, but I had been really into the Harry Potter series, which is why I was like so confused and unnerved by it, because I'd actually read it before they were telling me this was the devil's work. So second grade, I started reading them. In fourth grade, I ended up getting to the fourth book, The Goblet of Fire. And you know the beginning of that book where the Dementors come out of the forest after the games? I immediately shut that book. I got scared. I couldn't sleep.
Snap.
I went crying to my parents, and I'd never read a single Harry Potter book since then.
No way.
Since fourth grade.
What?
That was my evolution of reading Harry Potter, and then I'd watched most of the Harry Potter series. So yeah, I love.
Okay,
Harry
so
Potter.
you've seen.
I'm a good millennial. Yeah, I've seen.
Well done. You know, you get 10 millennial points.
I'm a well-read millennial. I've read the Harry Potter series and the Lord of the Rings.
I left Christianity because of Harry Potter, and maybe it is the devil. Now, I mean, I feel like this is just proving the point.
Maybe
it
was.
You know?
Maybe that Baptist preacher was right. But no, I love Harry Potter.
Well, the reason I ask is first, just checking like how nerdy are you before I, divulge my nerdy secrets of being a kid. But
well, let's just remember, I thought your Quidditch playing was cool. So
okay, touche.
Pretty
That's
nerdy.
Fair. That's very fair. Touche. Okay, so my short story here for you is this is the level of nerd that I was, and like how deeply I believed in fantasy and wanted it to be real. Of course, like most children who read Harry Potter, I was deeply disappointed on my, 11th or 12th birthday when I didn't get the Harry Potter, Hogwarts letter. But even deeper nerd level than that, I remember just so desperately wanting to be able to do magic that I would sit at my desk in my room. And I was probably, I don't know, anywhere between 5th and 7th grade. I probably did this multiple times. And I would stare at the pencil on my desk and I would try to will it to move. I literally did this so many times.
Like your Matilda?
No, like this is not an exaggeration, like Matilda. And I have always had this hope that that my mind or my belief would be able to just move that pencil.
Mm-hmm.
And I bring this up because the topic today is really noetic science, which is really, if you boil it down, it's this idea of can our thoughts in our mind actually affect reality? So before I even share more of the even deeper nerdiness of what noetic science is, I wanted to start you with a question, which is, do you actually believe that your thoughts can affect reality in a physics sense, in a science sense, not in a if I believe stuff, it will slowly over time change my psychology and therefore I'll achieve it. But I'm talking about, do your thoughts have the ability to actually shape reality?
So not like if I say I'm going to be a millionaire in the mirror every morning, I'll just magically wake up with $1 million. Not like that, right?
What I want to know is, do you believe that your mind actually changes the physics of the world around you? Do you yes or no? Where would you lie on that?
I don't know. I wouldn't think so off the top of my head, right? It wouldn't make sense based off of how I've been taught about, science and physics and even psychology, right? There's really not a common thought process around whether or not us as people can change matter, or if we're forced within these laws to behave the way that we have no choice around.
Okay, good. This is what I was hoping. I really was hoping that you would not believe what I believe, because I think my goal today is to just like try to put a crack a little bit in
Okay.
that worldview. And I will maybe completely fail this, but my goal is to just try to put a little crack in that and make you go, I don't know. Because this noetic science field did that for me. Growing up, trying to imagine moving a pencil with my mind was, of course, a child fantasy, right? Like, I'm not going to move a pencil with my mind, most likely, right? But I think that desire to hope for the ability to have our minds affect the world around us and our minds actually be more powerful, not in just a framing sense, which I completely support what you're saying. I think
Sure.
that is the key to happiness ultimately, in my opinion,
Sure.
right? Is how we frame and respond to the world around us and what we believe about that and the stories we have. That's what affects our happiness.
But you're saying whether or not I can literally change the properties of physics
Yes.
with my brain.
Yes.
That I'm going to need some convincing on.
I love that. Great. Let's see if I can just like even put a little bit of a crack. Have you ever heard of the double slit experiment or the observer effect?
Yes, as of about an hour ago when you briefed it to me.
Okay.
But I'm
Well,
definitely
let's
going
see
to
if you
need some
tracked it.
explanation.
Let's see if you tracked it. I'm going to try, and I was really trying to figure out like how do I, because this is an experiment that can get very complex and heady, and I'm really wanting to just simplify it.
Okay.
Basically, a bunch of scientists had this device that allows them to shoot photons. Okay, so they've got this photon shooter, right? And then they have this metal plate that has two tiny slits, like microns wide, right?
Okay.
When no one was actively observing this experiment, right? It's in a box somewhere far away. The photons would behave in a particular way. They would behave as waves. So they would go through these slits, and on the other side of the slits, they would essentially paint this light picture on
Sure.
a receiving device,
I
right?
saw that. Yeah. I
So they're
remember.
painting this light picture. That's wave behavior of photons, right? But then they brought in a device that could measure which of the two slits the photons were going through, because they were curious. Is it going through both? Is it going through one of them? How does this work? They got a different observation than they were realizing, which was adding that observation device changed the behavior of the photons. So instead of the photons now going through both slits and just painting that whole receiving device in a wave, it created two really specific like patterns that mimicked the slits. And so what that really means, that's like what you're looking at me like, what the hell did you just say to me? And that's a fair response. Basically what it means is by adding observation, by adding human observation into the experiment, it changed how photons behaved, which totally rocked the world of physics, right? Because the world of physics loves this story that observation consciousness does not affect reality. It's just this independent thing. There is no interaction between observation and results, right? Like that's not how the universe works.
Sure. Things are happening whether or not we see them.
Exactly. And this experiment completely shattered that.
Wow.
And really has played a big role in the world of quantum physics and saying like, okay, we know from this experiment, I don't know if I want to use the word know because that's too hard in the science world, but we can infer from this experiment that our observation does in fact alter the way physics, literally quantum physics, subatomic particles function, right?
Is the measurement or the observer the thing that's changing the particles?
It's the observer,
So it's the fact that someone's seeing it.
literally. And they've done this
So-
over and over and over.
So a tree does make a sound.
I mean,
Or maybe it doesn't.
we don't know.
Or
We'll
maybe
never
the
know.
tree doesn't even exist until we look at it. Maybe that's
So
what
that's
you're
what
saying.
some people like try to get in. Like another way to explain this like very heady scientific experiment is the way video games function, actually, which is, you know, if you're moving around in a video game world, it does not exist until the player moves into a certain space and then we load the game.
I've heard about this before. Yeah, and that
Right.
makes sense, right?
And so some people say, like, is that actually the way certain parts of reality work, where like certain properties are not exhibited until consciousness is present? So what does it look like or feel like before consciousness is present, or when consciousness, we can't really actually know.
Right. So go back to the experiment and explain the results. How did the results differ from physics?
Well, I mean, it's not that it differed from physics, it's just changing the way physics thinks about itself, right?
How
So
so?
physics again was thinking that an observer or consciousness, essentially the mind, has no impact on reality or the physical world, right? And so this experiment was an anomaly. It was saying, like, okay, observation, literally the act of observation, changes the results of an experiment. Which, of course, when you're thinking about the way science is set up as a worldview, really, is it's all about observation, hypotheses, testing null hypotheses, and inductive reasoning, or like over time refining how you think about things. So if you're not able to trust that observation does or does not impact that, it made people really question all sorts of things, right? And that's why a lot of people don't want to think about it or talk about it, because it scares them. So now I want to take you another level deeper, right? They recreated this double slit experiment, but added a new element that was different from before. And the guy who really has popularized this or talked most about it, I'm sure he worked with a larger team. His name is Dean Radin. And he's one of the main voices connected to the field of noetic science. And what he did was he recreated this double slit experiment, but now he added a meditator.
Person meditating?
Literally a person meditating.
Okay.
And he started by having that person meditate in the same room as this double slit experiment, and having the meditator actually imagining the photons going through the double slit. So had them imagine the double slit and not actually look at it. Like the person could not physically see it. They were just somewhere else in the room imagining that thing.
I get it.
And what they found was incredibly statistically significant results showing that it had an impact on the way the particles behaved.
Meaning the way he thought about the particles moving affected how the particles moved?
Literally, yeah. The meditator consciously thinking about what was happening in that experiment in that moment, they could literally see it on a time. Like they would say, think about this. There would be a brief lag, right? As like the brain then switches over and thinks about it, and they would see statistically valid results. And they repeated this thousands of times, till they could like really look at the statistical significance. Then they said, okay, let's take this a step further. Is this, there's a lot of things related to all the instruments and materials that can be affected by the way maybe somebody moves or leans over. So they said, maybe this is just somebody leaning in when they're thinking. Let's really do something different. Let's take this person and put them very, very far away. I don't even remember the exact distance, but I'm guessing it was like in another city or something. And they said, let's have this person connected via the internet and have them, again, meditating and thinking about the experiment. And we'll be able to know through the internet when that's happening. And they also observed the same thing. Whenever the person was thinking about it, an experienced meditator, there was a result that was happening in these particles.
Did they use a control as well?
They had, yeah. I'm not scientifically versed enough to explain all of that, but they kept repeating this experiment because they were like, this is impossible. Let's try this control. This is impossible. Let's try this control. And over and over and over, they kept finding that even with all these controls, it didn't matter. So what they learned from that was, not only does the mind actually affect reality itself, like literal physical subatomic particles, distance doesn't matter.
Okay, well,
is this wrecking you a little
why
bit?
Yeah, so then how does that affect? So like, give me, okay, I completely understand the study now. First of all, thank you because when I went through that video, everything that you said, I understood as soon as you added the right context to it, right? The study makes sense. The adding the meditator, I remember all of this now. What I didn't understand, and the last couple minutes alluded to this, was how does this affect how we can then affect things.
Yo, that's the question I've been sitting with since I learned about noetic science, which actually was not in a like scientific way. It was from Dan Brown, who wrote like the Da Vinci Code. He wrote another book that in it, one of the things is all about this idea of noetic science. And I think he explains it the most simply in that book. What, again, it's a fiction book, it's a story, and he's obviously just enjoying bringing that into this historical fiction focused story because he loves like new types of science and fringe science. But he explains it in a really interesting way that has stuck with me ever since. That's really how I've been trying to play around with like, what does this mean in our daily lives, right? Like, why does this matter? Why does somebody shooting photons at a double slit metal plate? How does that even
exactly?
How is that relatable
to
our lives?
To me?
Literally. And so the way it's explained in that book by Dan Brown is, what if our thoughts have mass and gravity? And this is not what noetic science is saying. This is just a fiction book's way of explaining it. But I felt like it was so much more accessible.
Sure.
So imagine, what if one of your thoughts was a single grain of sand? Okay. If you picked up a single grain of sand and you put it in your hand, could you even feel it?
No, it'd be insignificant.
Can you feel the weight of that, or can you even sense the gravity of that? No. Right. Now let's say you pick up a handful of sand. Can you feel that?
Sure.
Right. That's the metaphor for what if your thoughts accreting and growing over time, especially if it's the same type of thought, actually attracts more mass and gravity and therefore can shape reality. Again, what I'm saying right now is not scientifically based. That is not me reading a scientific experiment. This is purely a fictional explanation of it.
Sure.
And I think, to answer your question of why does this matter to us in the real world, I don't think the science is at a level to really give us that answer right now.
Okay.
I think we're very much in the space of just like, how do I make sense of this as a person without any additional information? So I think, as always, when you have science that's like very much still in the frontier, you have to decide if you're somebody who's going to go, okay, that's cool. Well, I'll check back in 1,000 years when that's evolved and decide what to do with that. I'm not that way. I think I'm very much somebody who goes, okay, there is where current science is at, and then there is where, like more practical wisdom is. And I sometimes go, well, what's the link between those? Mm-hmm. And what I really mean by that is, okay, we got this world of quantum physics, particularly this noetic science concept. We've got the observer effect, right? That's over here. And then we have a huge body of human work around law of attraction, manifestation theory, rewiring your mind, mindset, right? Like people call it 1,000 different names.
Sure.
And I can just say from my own experience, I can't speak for everyone else, but I've found that those things do two things for me. One, they of course reframe my mind, what you were talking about at the beginning of the podcast. They change how I experience reality, hopefully in better ways. Totally true and effective from a psychological standpoint.
Yeah.
But I've also had a lot of crazy stuff happen to me that I have a hard time explaining with statistics and chance.
Okay. Well, where do you want noetic science to go? Like, what do you hope this means? Like, because we don't know what this means, but like, what do you hope this means? Like, what's the spin on this that you're like, and if this is true, right, here's what this could mean for us as humans, as for reality, for how we think of the world.
That's such a good question. It's funny. I think my answer is two parts. Okay. There's the child version of me answer, and then there's the adult version answer of me.
Sure.
The child version of me is that kid sitting in my bedroom with a pencil on my desk, Harry Potter next to my bed over on the left, me sitting there staring at this pen or pencil, trying to move it with my mind. And I feel like this experiment, this observer effect double slit experiment, is actual scientific proof that maybe that's not as crazy as I think it is.
Can I give you an example that just came to mind for me, and let me know if I'm on kind of the right page? But I've had this phenomenon that's happened to me many, many times in my life where I'll be in a crowd of people and I will think I have seen someone, and I might even think I've seen them multiple times, and then they show up out of like almost nowhere, where I feel like it's like almost like I was looking for them and then they just magically appeared. And I've never been able to explain it, but it's happened multiple times where I'm like, I think that's so-and-so. Oh no, that wasn't. And then within a very unexplainable short period of time, I will have seen that actual person. I'm like, I just thought I saw you. They're like, no, that wasn't me. And that's just something that's happened multiple times that I don't have an answer for, but I'm not sure if I manifested them. But at the end of the day, I don't know how they appeared from my thoughts.
Well, and I feel like there are so many like really sharp statistical or scientific or engineering minds that would hear what you're saying and and respond to you like, of course that's not you manifesting that with your thoughts. Of course there's a very logical reason that happened, right? And I feel like that's still not true. Like I don't know. Like I don't have any real credible scientific reason to explain that to you other than like I feel in my bones, like because of experiences like you've just talked about that have happened to me over and over and over, that sometimes I think we're able to affect reality with our minds. Like I really don't have a good explanation other than like I've just seen it happen in ways that are just astounding to me over and over and over in little ways, like trying to find my keys or, needing money because I'm in a tight spot and someone somehow produces the exact dollar amount that I'm needing, or, it's a thousand little ways. And I don't know how else to explain it.
Do you think some people use terms like the universe or God or even manifestation as a way to explain what you're talking
Oh,
about?
100%.
Because I think people are familiar with the notion of what you're saying and the feeling that brings you, but I think a lot of people explain that through everywhere from luck to spirituality, and whether it's whatever God you want to believe in, that's God's work, right?
Well,
But
prayer in a way, right, is really
sure.
just focusing your mind on something and then trying and hoping that it comes to you, whether if you believe that's God bringing it to you, or you could believe it's like some element of quantum physics, right? But
Or what you're introducing is the idea that maybe it is you bringing that to you, right? Maybe that's
yeah,
not something else or someone else. Maybe that's just your ability to will things to happen, right? My mom always, her name's Brandy. She always used the term Brandy will as her ability to just make things happen,
mm,
right? Almost out of nothing. And I would ration that away to hard work and consistency, but
mm-hmm.
a lot of that is just the sheer will of wanting something to happen, right?
And I sometimes wonder if like, you see people who are hyper successful, right? And we often attribute it to their willpower and their grit. And I think all of those things are true, but I sometimes think some people have mastered this mental ability to literally create gravity with their thoughts. And I sometimes wonder, like, what if it's all of that working together, why they're so successful? And I think that's really why I even wanted to bring this up on this podcast of like where the mind goes, right? In my mind and I guess my heart, I believe that our mind actually is able to shape the world around us if we learn how to use it, not only in the framing and our experience of it, like you said, but of course in our grit and willpower and our discipline of keeping going, but maybe also in being able to attract to us the things we actually want. If we
Yeah.
know how to use affirmations right, if we know how to use morning rituals right, I think all of these are the tools and science of being able to do that as a human being. But I mean, I have no science really to back that particular theory up.
No, but I mean, one of the first things we kind of resonated on and why we wanted to talk was this idea that our mind does drive us to action, right? And how we set ourselves up mentally is going to guide us physically, right? Whether that's in a literal way, right, where it's I want to think about getting to a destination, like growing, getting stronger, like we had first talked about, right? Growing muscle and being able to physically put your mind into that and manifest it happening, right? Actually putting your mind into that muscle and thinking about it growing. There's a lot of data. I was actually listening to a podcast today talking about that. There's scientific data that shows that just thinking about a muscle increases the activation and the feedback that gives us. And that's powerful, right? Because what that says is our mind is affecting our action. Now, again, I can ration that away by talking about things like proprioception and being able to see a muscle flex, or neuromuscular connection and the ability to drive better muscle or nerve function when you are fully activating a muscle, right? There's ways I can explain it, but at the end of the day, what I'm saying is my mind can affect my body, and my mind can affect more than just my body. Sometimes it can affect the things around me with, you know, how I act, who I am. And again, people will just say that's your aura, that's your personality. But maybe it's a little bit, there's some scientific evidence now. That's what you're saying.
I mean, we literally have evidence that your mind miles away can affect a photon. So if it can affect a photon, maybe it can affect other things. I don't know.
And just to kind of wrap up the idea, right, tying it back to something more tangible like spirituality, it's the same thing as saying like, oh, I'm praying for you. You know, I'm in a completely different city, but I'm putting my mind in there with you, trying to affect what's happening to you, giving you good thoughts, right? And hoping that has a physical, that changes the physical properties of your life. It's no different than what you're saying.
No, not really. I mean, and I think ultimately where I land on this is just, I don't even care if it's true or not. You know, like I could be wrong about that, but what harm is there in me imagining good things for other people or for myself? And I mean, at the end of the day, maybe it's just well-wishing, but maybe it also actually brings things into reality.
Where the mind goes.